TV. I'm Bob Bauer. There's some fantastic places in this country to start an off-road adventure. But keeping these places open to enjoy means that we have to do our part to tread lightly. This is how one group manages to do that.
Off-roaders are destroying the environment. They race on their loud, noisy machines, drive crazily through the dunes, party all night, then roar away, leaving mountains of trash behind. Have you ever heard something like this before? The duning enthusiasts at Glamis have. In fact, to prohibit off-road access to public lands, environmentalists have forced temporary closures of prime duning areas by filing suit with regards to an alleged endangered desert plant. As it turns out, this plant may not be so endangered, and off-road enthusiasts are not so cavalier. And that's what this episode is about. Forced with the prospects of temporary closures becoming permanent, the off-roading community of the Imperial Sand Dunes Recreation Area has found many allies in their ongoing efforts to preserve public access to, arguably, the sand duning capital of the world. And with cleaning up their seemingly exaggerated image problem. The Imperial Sand Dunes Recreation Area, commonly known as Glamis, offers over 150,000 acres of sand duning paradise in the southeast corner of California, and are the largest sand dunes open to off-highway vehicle use in the U.S. These challenging bowls and giant peaks have attracted off-road enthusiasts for generations.
Thanksgiving is our busiest weekend, and we'll have about 150,000 visitors during that time frame. And December is usually our slow month with, say 10 or 15,000 people on a weekend. But, an average weekend is about 20,000 people. And that's individual people, and that's all the families. We have 2-3 generations in a camp usually. Little kids all the way to 80, 90-year-olds out riding quads and driving dune buggies.
I've been coming to the dunes for 35 years, and I want to see them stay open. I have my kids come out here, my grandkids come out here, and that's primarily my thing. I think the dunes are a really good place where you can. Not many places where you can have your 3 generations or 4 generations come out and do the same thing. I take my dune buggy and take my granddaughters, and they love going out for a ride. One's 5 and one's 2, and I hope that it just stays open for them to be able to keep coming to the dunes.
We come out here half a dozen times a year in Mexico, and just to have it closed down would just be a shame.
The writer's concerns began in March of 2000 when environmentalists sued the Bureau of Land Management, alleging a violation of the Federal Endangered Species Act. The lawsuit would have closed the Glamis dunes if it weren't for the valiant efforts of a coalition of off-highway enthusiasts and related business associations. Eventually, a compromise agreement led to the closure of nearly 50,000 acres of dune area. The plant in question? The Pearson's milk vetch, a desert plant found primarily in portions of the Algonis Dunes in Imperial County, California. To mitigate possible damage caused by off-road activities and to ensure continued dune access, such groups as the American Sand Association, Off-Road Business Association, and United Desert Gateway joined forces. And a major phase of their efforts has been the sponsoring of an ongoing survey by independent botanists.
Pearson's milk vetch was listed as a threatened species by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 1998. It was listed really without a whole lot of information on the ground about the plant, its biology, its distribution, and the effects of off-road vehicles on the survival of the plant. So our studies began in the spring of 2001 and were sponsored by the American Sand Association, that's a user group of off-road vehicles at the dunes. And the conflict between a threatened species and the the off-road vehicles was a perceived big problem and one of the main reasons for the listing. And so what we wanted to do was come out here and take a look at how the plants were doing in terms of coexisting with off-road vehicles.
Can off-roaders and the Pearson's milk vetch coexist at the Glamis Dunes? We'll find out when Four-Wheeler TV returns. Can off-roaders and the Pearson's milk vetch coexist at the Glamis Dunes in California's Imperial Valley? With funding from the American Sand Association, botanist Art Phillips has been conducting studies of this desert plant for 6 years.
We're carrying out a seed bank study here, which means we're studying the seeds that are in the sand of the Pearson's milk vetch. And the way we do that is we randomly select points within this known site where the plant occurs. And then at these sites, we set up a rectangle that's 5 meters on one side and 2 meters on another. And we have frames which we push into the sand. The frames are two different sizes. One of them is 1 meter by a quarter meter. One of them is a half meter by a quarter meter. The frames are pushed into the sand to a distance of about 4 inches. And first of all, when we get the frame in place, we count any seeds that might happen to be on the surface. And then we scoop out the sand using a plastic scoop, run it through a soil sieve. The soil sieve lets the sand go through, but it captures the seeds. And so then we simply count the seeds. We'll do 10 big frames and 10 small frames at each of 3 places within each site, randomly selected places. And from that data, we can then extrapolate to the number of seeds that are in the sand at this site. The plant seems to be doing very well here. Its numbers vary tremendously from year to year, depending upon rainfall. And we've been working out here now. This is the 6th season that we've looked at it. Some years when there's lots of rainfall, we find many, many plants that germinate. The ones that germinate in the fall, if there's rain in between the end of October and, say, the middle of December, those plants will go ahead and flower the following spring. So the first-year plants can reproduce during the spring of their first year. And when I first started this study, I told the American Sand Association board that I was happy to come out and do the project, but I wasn't sure that they'd be happy with the answer I gave. But as soon as I got out here, I found out that there's a lot more to this situation than immediately met the eye. And that was that there was indeed a coexistence of these plants with the off-road vehicles for several reasons. One is that the plants are concentrated in bowls that have quite a bit of other vegetation in them. Off-road vehicles in general don't go in such places. Their tires are thin, they're expensive, and if they run over a stick, they're likely to get punctured. So the duners are looking for the tall dunes that are free of vegetation. And they'll pass through places like this where there are lots of plants, but in general they don't like to stay here. So there is a de facto separation between heavy use and plant distribution. I think another thing is that these plants are pretty resilient. This is a very, very harsh environment.
It seems a fair assumption that given the very harsh environmental factors of the Glamis Dunes, an accidental brush with a dune buggy would be nothing compared to the wind, droughts, heat, and cold these plants must constantly endure.
I think the studies that we're doing now, and BLM is also carrying out studies at the same time. Fish and Wildlife Service is carrying out studies. These haven't been going as long as ours have, but they're looking at seed banks and distribution and so forth. And I think everybody's pretty much coming up with the same answer, that the effects of off-road vehicles and the plants on the plants are fairly minimal, that there is a coexistence here. We have submitted a petition to delist this species, that is to remove it from the endangered species list, and that petition is now working its way through the Fish and Wildlife Service hierarchy. It'll be a while before we know the outcome of that, but if it's delisted, that will mean that there's a finding that it's not in jeopardy from off-road vehicles, or for that matter from any other reason.
Though official court rulings have not been given regarding these study results and the reopening of closed dune areas, it is clear that off-roaders and the Pearson's milk veg can coexist. The costs and efforts to ensure public access has been enormous for all groups involved, and it's been strongly suggested that the Endangered Species Act is in need of some serious reformation.
One of the aspects about this whole situation that, from a standpoint of a botanist, is kind of unfortunate is that there have been nearly $3 million spent on this plant by BLM, by Fish and Wildlife Service, by lawsuits, by the American Sand Association hiring us. It's very unfortunate that this amount of money has been spent on a plant that really doesn't even deserve to have that much money spent on it, when other plants that really are truly endangered go wanting and don't get any funding at all.
Rallying to save public access has also given off-roaders a deeper appreciation for this dune rider's paradise. In fact, you'll see how riders are becoming stewards of their dunes. There they go again. Thousands of off-road enthusiasts with their campers and equipment rushing the dunes like an invading army. Even this chilly winter weekend isn't slowing them down. Now, who's going to clean up all this mess? Hey, wait a minute. Something's going on here. Perhaps spurred by the prospect of permanent closures, or simply inspired by the noble efforts of a concerned enthusiast, a new sense of dune stewardship is spreading.
The way this whole thing started was back in July. There was a group of drag racers out at one of the popular spots, Oldsmobile Hill, bragging about they held an event and how clean they had left the hill. My uncle and myself decided to go out there, checked it out. The place was absolutely trash. Picked up trash bags, got involved with ASA, and Weekend Warrior donated a bunch of trash bags. I started distributing them to vendors, and the message wasn't really getting out. So I went out to the hill one day in my old pickup truck, started handing bags out, and as soon as I started handing them out, people just grabbed them, filled them up, and ended up filling the back of my truck up a few times. I was at a meeting with the owner of Funco, Grant George, and he said, "Hey, Tim, your truck doesn't look like it's going to last too long." And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "Well, let me work on something." Well, they teamed up with Sunrise Ford, Funco, American Sand Association, GlamisWeather.com, GlamisDunes.com. They all pitched in to get this new truck out, and so far this season I've distributed about 34,000 trash bags. Every time I go out and hand out trash bags, the duners themselves get more and more involved picking up trash. It has turned to where I was originally picking up a lot of trash. Now I'm just handing out bags and hauling full bags in.
What began as a one-person operation to keep the dunes trash-free has become a community-wide campaign. This sense of stewardship has also encouraged a sense of community and an unprecedented union of cooperation.
One of the things that really has made a big difference out here is the BLM working with us to work with them. A few years ago, it would be unthinkable for us to pass out data with the ASA logo on it. And now we work together and we pass out data that has the BLM logo and has the ASA logo on it. And that's kind of unheard of. And some of the people from Washington think that that's going to be the thing of the future here for other locations. And if you'll notice on that banner there, we have the BLM logo and we have the, what's the other one? We have the ASA logo and the UDG logo and the Sheriff's logo. And so that's a partnership between the Imperial County Sheriff, BLM, the UDG, and the ASA, all working together to try to make this place a better place.
Together working with the UDG and getting the safety information out mainly to the visitors that come to the sand dunes has really changed things. In addition to that, the UDG and the ASA working together with the BLM on our outreach campaign for litter has made a significant impacts. At one time, you could go out to, say, Oldsmobile Hill after a busy weekend, and there would be tons of trash to pick up, and we'd go out there and pick up the trash. We've refocused our efforts with our partners to actually pass out trash bags, and the visitors are doing it themselves now. With that cooperation, we're seeing a change on the ground now where visitors are getting handed trash bags free from our sponsors and partners, but they're having a hard time finding trash sometimes out in the dunes. And that's a good thing. That's a good change. it's a positive change, and it's going to make a positive impact here in the recreation area.
Thanks to ASA Dune Outreach Team Leader Tim Gantz and a host of related agencies and associations, we would be hard-pressed to find that trash we were talking about.
Handed out 34,000 United Desert Gateway, Leo the Lizard, you want to stay and play, take your trash away, trash bags out. Plus about 20,000 of four-wheel parts and probably about 5,000 of American Honda trash bags.
So who's going to clean up this mess? We all are. These are our public lands. And if you're in Glamis and need a trash bag, just look for Tim and his bright yellow truck. The Pearson's milk vetch is going to be just fine, providing the dunes get some occasional rains. Recent studies of the milk vetch have shown that the survivability of this hardy desert plant is not in jeopardy, prompting the petition to delist it as an endangered species. Until the legal dust settles, the reopening of the current prohibited areas is still a question. To ease some pressure, the Bureau of Land Management has proposed a limited use program. This adaptive management program would provide recreational opportunities while promoting the conservation of natural habitats.
There seems to be a misconception that BLM is trying to close the recreation area, and that's not true. In fact, the closures that we have now in the dunes are temporary until we receive a judgment from the court. Once we receive that judgment, we hope to be able to open the sand dunes back up. And the area in the center of the dunes is going to be called an adaptive management area. That area will be reopened to off-highway vehicles to a limited number. And visitors who want to ride in that area are going to have to come to the ranger station or to the BLM and get a permit to ride, kind of like a backcountry permit. It's basically a resource conservation program, and it teaches people about the habitat in that area. Once they learn about that, we're going to give them a ticket to ride out in the adaptive management area. So we're hoping that we can reopen the dunes, take away these closures, and let people ride out in those areas in limited use so that we provide recreation opportunities yet conserve our natural resources.
Whatever the legal outcome, there's a strong argument that the survival of the Pearson's milk vetch was not likely the primary issue behind the lawsuit, prompting suggestions that the Endangered Species Act is in need of a major overhaul.
Okay, but the Endangered Species Act is, of course, one of the most stringent pieces of legislation we have environmentally, and so lots of times the Endangered Species Act is used not necessarily to protect a particular species, but it can be used to carry out another agenda, and that's unfortunate because that's not really what it was intended to do. It's intended strictly to protect endangered species and their habitats, and not to close down areas or do anything that's beyond the scope of the legislation itself. And when this sort of thing happens, it creates a backlash against the Endangered Species Act, which is a valuable piece of legislation for protecting rare plants and animals. And that backlash is unwarranted. It's not a backlash against the plants themselves or the animals themselves. It's a backlash against misuse of that legislation to carry out another agenda.
Families have enjoyed the Imperial Sand Dune Recreation Area for generations and have every hope to keep it available to future generations. But as we've learned, until such laws as the Endangered Species Act are afforded a closer look, we can't consider recreational access to public lands a given. Faced with the real prospect of losing it all, the off-roading community developed a unique coalition of enthusiast associations, city agencies, related business associations, and government agencies to help preserve this valuable recreational area. How they continue to rally together can serve as a model for recreation enthusiasts nationwide. Their efforts remind us to stay informed of related local and national issues, get involved with OHV associations, and just as important, we must become stewards of our public lands. Litter in the dunes means dunes closures. Like Leo the Lizard says, if you want to stay and play, take your trash away.
We want to get the message out that the duner is a responsible person, and so if they can show that, that's better. We want to get the word out about our work with the milk vetch, and that the plant is not endangered and it's a plant that needs to be delisted. That's one of the things we're trying to do. And so if you can see that the high quality of the work that's being done to get more information about this plant and how we take care of the land, whether it's the Dunes outreach team or books on safety or our work with other agencies, UDG, with the BLM. We just want people to know that Duners are responsible people.